La estabilometría o posturometría es una vieja historia.
Stabilometry or posturography is an old story. It's an old conspiration in science. This is the first work on stabilometry that was performed in the year 1895. This is a work by Brown and Fisher, who back then were working for the Prussian army. And the problem that I wanted to solve was how to adopt a right posture when shooting so that they could prevent falling because of the backfiring of the opposite force exerted by the rifles when used. And what they did was to use pictures, photographs, because there was no other technology available. And they calculated with very high precision the position of the mass center in space in 3D. Well, they used 8 corpses and photography techniques. That were their resources. And I don't know if you can see it here, but if this were the projection of the pressure center on the surface of the individual, the projection would fall between the base, right? The supporting base. That was it. And I was going to make one point. And they say that all modern sciences were developed in the train that traveled from Berlin to Leipzig. All the German scientists were there. And this is the legacy that they have given us. I'm not going to insist on this too much, but in falls, we have this tangle of aspects. If I were a biochemist, I would talk about drugs. If I were, I don't know, a neurologist, I would talk about the vestibular system pathologies. And, well, therefore, we see that there's many causes, many risk factors in falls, and therefore, there is also a very important factor that has to do with aging, which is a pillar for our work, by the way. I haven't mentioned it until now because I thought it would come up. This is a flow chart, an information flow chart. Here you can possibly discern the following sections. This is the neurological part. This other part relates to the upper centers of the central nervous system. But something that there's no doubt about is that no matter how you think of it, the posture adopted will be a consequence of the interaction between gravity and friction. Without friction, we wouldn't be able to do practically anything. So gravity and friction are forces, external forces that are present. And then muscle tension is an internal force. And of course, the muscular movements and the joint movements. And the interaction of these two internal and external factors give rise to posture. Posture that's always subject to external disruptions. For instance, the robot that we just presented is about that, disturbing the system externally to see how it behaves. But all this needs to be done following the same criteria: balance, comfort, and resistance to fatigue. And this applies to any posture, including the 64 postures in Kama Sutra. It's exactly the same. You need to have balance, comfort, and resistance to fatigue.
Eso sí que me gustaría. Aquí veis precisamente lo que comentaba antes, porque son complementarias.
Now, this builds on what I mentioned earlier. In this graph, you see the position of the center of gravity. And in the dotted line, you see the position of the pressure center. It's X or Y, I don't know. But anyway, what you see here is that the movements, displacements, are changes in the x-coordinates regarding the pressure center are broader and they happen more frequently. This breadth of movement of the pressure center is very important because the pressure center needs to be in front or behind the center of gravity. And by definition, the pressure center is the point of application of the external forces on the support surface. So the point of application needs to be forwards or backwards. And this is done through dorsal or plantar pressure. This is why I was talking about the soleus and the anterior tibial. But something that is very important is to see the stabilograms, because even if supposedly I stand in the same posture, and by the way, there is a test, the net DVI, where you see a picture of the sole of your feet and you can perform the posturography. Well, this is not really the case because you can see the stabilogram and you will see that the coordinates of the pressure center concentrate in different areas. So, therefore, the distribution of pressure doesn't happen isotropically. Therefore, I need to see what part of the pressure platform is rendering better measurements, because it doesn't render the same measurements in all the different parts of the platform. This is why I said earlier, yes, everybody does have functional assessment and posturography, but how do they perform it? Is it correct? What they're doing is correct? Or and these are the tests that were performed, because what we're trying to do here was to train elderly individuals so that they could, in a way, counterbalance loss of balance or counteract loss of balance. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term extrapolated pressure center. The extrapolated pressure center, well, actually, the x and y coordinates are calculated based on this formula. And as you can see, this formula does not just depend on the morphological features of the individual. This would be the length of the hip, for instance, the distance from the hip to the floor, but it also includes the speed of the mass center. Therefore, we need to perform stabilometries, bearing in mind the extrapolated mass center. Earlier on, I said pressure center, but I meant mass center, extrapolated mass center. And I finished before time, so thank you. That's it.